Now you're watching this video because you actually want to build a property portfolio 10 times faster than an average Australian investor. So I'm going to show you exactly 5 ways to how you can find a hotspot. Now these 5 tips are the tips that you need to know so you can be in the top 0.068% of Australian investors that own 6 or more investment properties. Now, a lot of people struggle to build a property portfolio. They don't know how to find the location. They don't understand about market timing. They don't understand about due diligence. And these are things that I'm going to show you and teach you right now that you need to know. This is something that doesn't get spoken about on TV, doesn't get spoken about on YouTube channels or on podcasts or even listed in books. So I'm going to show you exactly what you need to know to be in the top 0.068% of Australian investors that own 6 or more investment properties. Something that you have to understand, and that's going to help you be a better investor. So let's get straight into it. Okay, the top 5 ways how to identify a hotspot. Super important, super impactful. So number 1, you probably heard about this a lot, infrastructure projects. Very simple, very basic, but very influential on a market. Okay, if we have a look here, this is a little map here, and there's money getting spent this was for 2021. Billions, if not billions of dollars all over the region, if not, hundreds of millions in certain regions of Australia. Now, not each infrastructure projects treated equally, but there is influence on all of them getting impacted into an environment. So I've got a bit of listings here on the left hand side, transport, hospitals, schools, universities, airports, ports, etc., roads, renewable energy farms, parks, etc. Now, when things like this start to happen, when there's a second airport getting implemented, when there is a new school getting implemented, or a secondary or a new university getting implemented, transport hubs, logistic companies, airports, port upgrades, new bridges and tunnels, renewable energy farms. These things here have a massive influence on the economy. Creation of jobs, movement of people, opportunity, more desirability in a location. Gentrification is starting to happen. Multiple of things are starting to change. Super important, something to look out for as well. Now, like I said, not every infrastructure project is treated equally. So it's something to look out for, because if you've got a location, let's say hypothetically, you got a Melbourne region, maybe a location, maybe let's pick on Coburg, for instance, which is north of Melbourne CBD. Okay. Now, if there's a new rail link getting put in, and it's got the high-rise rail, so it's going to stop traffic, so it's not going to slow down traffic, increase people getting to home and work faster. So the things like that, they've implemented parks underneath the old rail link and a whole bunch of other things, cafes, etc. Now, this place is already developed. There's a lot of things already happened in the past, schools, universities, etc. So something like that wouldn't have a massive effect on the economy. But when you look at certain regions, when there's multitude of things getting smashed into a region, an LGA, and there's things getting implemented, that's going to have an influence on the market. That's changing. Something's happening. There's a strategic plan in place. This is where you look at from a federal budget view, you look at from a state budget view, and you look at from a council budget view, and you look at the plan that they have in place for these regions, and that will give you an indicator of what is going on. Now, they're very, very sophisticated, the governments and the councils, of what they're doing, and the states as well. So this is something to take into consideration. Look at this and understand this, and this will give you better clarity about our location and what's happening. Number 2 is economic drivers. Now, I got here, so you want to pick 5, I guess, to choose from when you're looking at a particular region. And hypothetically, these are, of course, some industries here. I got a list here of economic drivers from ABS. Now, let's say you're looking at a region to invest in. You don't put all your eggs in one basket. You don't go invest all your property in one LGA. You buy one property in all different parts around Australia. And why? Because of economic drivers, and because of other reasons as well, which we'll touch on later. So for instance, let's say we invest in an Adelaide market, and that Adelaide market has, healthcare is one of the driving economics. We have retail as one of the driving economics, professional services, construction, and administration/food. So right now you've got 5 economic drivers driving this region. And if there's 5 or more, that's a bonus. If there's more than 5, that's a bonus. And what we want to compare that to is the state average. So let's say that's Adelaide, and they've got these 5 drivers. We want to compare that to the SA, South Australia. and the average of what the economy is being made up of. And if that's greater than the 5 drivers of the SA of South Australia, that means that this economy is quite strong and robust as well. And you can see there's, it's improving, and you can look at other previous history and see if it's been improving in the previous years to now. Something to look out for. But when we do this, we invest in a new location, and let's say we go to a Victorian location. Okay, we go to a Victorian location. This location is driven by education, manufacturing, public administration, support services, and transport hubs. So now these drivers are completely different to the other drivers that you purchased your property in Adelaide. And you've compared that to the state average in Victoria, and they're greater than the state average in Victoria. Now, what you look at for why you do this is because imagine there's a reset. Imagine something happens to the economy. Imagine something happens and the economy starts to go down. For instance, COVID. COVID was a good sign, and you see industries get blown out of the water because people like industries like retail, schools got closed down, retail got closed down, and a whole bunch of other sectors got closed down. The food services got closed down. So imagine if you invested in a location that was reluctant on those industries, and what happened to the economy. It's happened in the previous years when the mining sector dropped and those mining towns dropped and those property prices just plummeted. Same thing. So we want 5 economic drivers, so it's a robust location. And when we diversify our properties in all different robust economies, you're lowering your risk, which is the most important thing. Remember, this is probably one of the key fundamentals that gets missed out, doesn't get spoken about, people don't understand. You taking this on, you're going to be a better investor. And I can't harp on this enough because it's super important. Number 3, how to purchase the best property or investment property in the location. Now, there's a lot of things we're going to look at. So once we've found that location from a bird's eye view, we're looking down. We're going to look down from a ground level and find the best property in that region. What you do is, you found a few properties. What you're going to do is you're going to get an independent property inspector. Number 1 thing. Get that person that has no affiliation with the sales agent. They go in there, they do a report for you. Now, they can be a pest and building specialist or a property management team. They go out there, they take photos, do a video walkthrough, give you a written report, tell you what is wrong with the property and if there's anything that needs to be done to get it up to a standard level to get a tenant in the property. Super important. Making sure there's no easements on the property, because if you want to develop into an easement on the property, you're going to have restrictions. No caveats on the property at all. Getting your solicitor or your conveyancer to look over the contracts. Making sure your zonings are in check. Not in the flood zone, not in the bushfire zone, not in the air flight path zone. Sewage lines are not on the property. Making sure it's not in a noisy corridor. And the list goes on. Something that's very important. Next thing, insurance policy fees. Now, your property might not have been in any risk zones, but the insurance policies might be through the roof. And that's something that's going to wipe out your cash flow. And we don't want to be investing in locations like that because you're an investor. You're investing on a capital return. You're investing on a cash-on-cash return as well. So it's super important to make sure you're looking at insurance policies. Residential zoning. Now, if you're going to do a development or subdivision or add a granny flat on the property, you're going to make sure your residential zoning is in the right catchment zone. So we want to make sure it's maybe if it's going to be in a medium density or high density zoning. Why? You want to build a multi-dwelling property on there, or if you want to add a dwelling at the back, which is like a granny flat, you can on the property. Super important. When the zoning is in a medium or high density zoning, 9 times out of 10, your property has already gained even extra more equity because of that. It's more valuable because it's scarce land. Those sort of zonings there's not multiple of them in a region. Normally there's a lot of low density restricted zonings where you can't do too much to the property. So that's something to keep in mind. School catchment zones. We're looking into where the best schools are in this location. Get our property as close as possible because families look at that. And if you're going to get a family to rent out that property, they want to be in that property. What happens? It pumps up your prices, your rental prices as well, because they want to be close to that school. Red flags on the contract, something to look out for. Your conveyancer, your solicitor should pick that up straight away. Always getting your contracts reviewed. Pest and building report, getting an inspector in there, independent person, making sure they're doing the right DD. Get a building and a pest inspection done. How many renters versus owner-occupiers in the street? And from a suburb level. So when we go to a suburb, we want to see that there's more owner-occupiers living in a suburb than renters. Why? Because that gives you an understanding that the owner-occupiers actually drive prices more and they look after their properties as well because they're emotional people. Investors are more purchasing by logic and numbers. Okay. Now, when we look at from a suburb level, we can see, okay, there's a ratio. Now, we don't want less than 10% renters, and we don't want more than 40% renters. So in between that 10 to 40% of renters in a location, which is a sweet spot. But then we want to look at it from a street level. We want to look in the street, how many renters versus owner occ. And so this is important. We don't want more than 30% renters in that street. Okay. The less, the better, because that shows you there's more capital growth in that street, because owners will look after their property, they'll do up their properties, and they're in and it improves the whole quality of the street, and the street will flourish and grow by that. So it's important to take that in consideration. Make sure your property is on the main road or connecting road, super important. And then as well, public housing zoning, suburbs. Now, you might invest in a location, there might be public housing in that location. You've got to find out exactly where it is and make sure you don't invest where the house is close to that public housing, because unfortunately your prices will lose some value, because if it's close or if it's in that zone, your property is not going to be as valuable if it was out of that public housing zone. So it's something to look out for an investor point of view. Now, next thing here, number 4, is probably one of the biggest things I can talk about, and something that you're going to learn right now you've probably never heard of: the 5-year boom window. Now, this is something that you need to know so you can maximize your wealth in property. Okay. Now, every market, every LGA, which is your local government area, an LGA is, let's say, your council. So where you live, there's a council that runs that city. That's an LGA. That council area, every 15 to 20 years, it has 2 boom phases running through it. And that boom phase, one boom phase is going to last for 5 years. And then what will happen is there can be a slowdown or a reset, and then it continue again later on in the future. And so this is something to look out for, because there's only 2 boom phases normally per an LGA in 15, 20 years. Okay. And I'll show you examples now. And you don't want to be getting in at the wrong time, because you will cost yourself hundreds, if not millions of dollars in growth. And I'll show you right now some examples. Here's Frankston, 40 kilometers southeast of Melbourne. So 5-year boom phase started in 2013 to 2017. 78% growth in 5 years. So this is from an LGA perspective. So as we can see, it's grown in value tremendously. Double-digit growth. Some years didn't have double-digit growth, but this is from a whole LGA area. If we look at this from a suburb level in the suburbs in Frankston, this will be completely different. But as you can see, growth. 2017, slowdown. And then 2020, picked up again, or 2021, picked up, bang, new recovery line. That's a second growth phase. I'm showing you here because why I'm showing you this is because a lot of people hear on the news, hear magazines, and they say, oh, Frankston's been doing so well. And they get in at 2015, 16, or even 17, and guess what? The market just drops and you've lost out. You want to be getting in at 2013, 14. And I'm going to show you exactly what you need to know and how you can do that moving forward. And this is super important, because you get in at the wrong time, you're going to cost yourself hundreds of thousands of dollars. Here's another location, Gympie, regional town, 170 kilometers north of Brisbane, not far from Sunshine Coast. So it's just started its 5-year boom phase in 2020. Now, as you can see, it's gone sideways since from 2012, the last 10 years, so from 2012 to 20, the last 8 years I should say, it's gone sideways. Hasn't grown in value. Now, this is a great market. As you can see, from 2020 to 21, and even this year, it's probably going to have another 30+% growth. It's dominating the market. Now, if you go back to the fundamentals that we just touched on, there's a lot of infrastructure projects, movement of people, a lot of things happening in that location, heaps of influence in the market. Not speculation. Plus, there's a low supply of housing. But you can see this is dominating the market. Now, people will look at this and get in now. And that's the wrong time to get in now. You should have got in at 2020, 21. And that market, it will grow for another few years, and then it's going to slow down. And so if people get in now, that's okay. You might get another 1 or 2 years of growth, but then it's going to slow down. You would rather have 5 years, because in those 5 years, you probably could have released, 2 or 3 lots of equity from your investment property to buy other properties. Super important. It's something to look at long term, not short term. We want to make a calculated decision. Another place, Hobart, 2012 to 2018, 66% growth in 5 years. As you can see, double-digit growth. Then it slowed down. So it creeped up, slowed down, and then bang, it started its new growth phase again. This is its second one now. And you know, a lot of people got in at 2016, 17. I remember on the news, they were talking about Hobart, you know, in 2016, talking about how well it's done. It's, you know, it's growing tremendously. It's got a different environment. They're investing a lot in healthcare and all other industries as well in Hobart. You got in 2016. Imagine you got in, okay, it grew 13%, then it grew 15%, then guess what? -200. So this is something to look out for. Something, if you can look at this, you can make an informed decision. You can see where it's starting. Super important to look out for. Number 5, what 99.6% of property investors don't know. Why I say 99.6 is because 0.4% of Australian investors own 3 or more investment properties. So if you want to be in the top 0.4%, implement these tactics and you will outweigh the odds. Now, diversifying your property portfolio. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. So when we're investing and purchasing properties in different states and territories. Okay, super important. Don't just put all your eggs in one basket. Okay, and why we do that is because if we're researching, we're looking at the economic drivers driving that LGA. So with number 2, tip number 2, which we spoke about, every region's got different economic drivers, and that's going to minimize your risk. And by doing that, you're going to make sure that you even out that portfolio and you don't put yourself at risk. If you put all your eggs in one basket, with the same economic drivers, when that property market does fall, your whole portfolio will fall. Something to look out for. Land tax. Investing in different states and territory has different land tax concessions. Victoria has different land tax concessions to Queensland. So in Victoria, you invest in Victoria, straight away you buy an investment property, you're going to pay land tax. In Queensland, you will not pay land tax until your land value exceeds $600,000. So if your land does not exceed $600,000, you do not have to pay any land tax. And every other state has different laws. So it's super important. Market cycle and growth phase. So what we talked on before about that 5-year boom window. This is something, if you invest in different markets, they start their boom windows at different times. Now, in the late 80s and early 90s, Melbourne had a recession. The property market had a recession. But Perth and Brisbane, were just growing tremendously in value, even Hobart. Okay? And so when there is a downturn in markets, not every market's treated equally. So if we look from 2008 to 10, when the mining collapsed, and you had Port Hedland and all those mining towns collapse, but this is when Melbourne and Sydney property market actually started to boom. And so during that time when it started to boom, actually South Australia or Adelaide and Brisbane really didn't do much, didn't do anything at all. It just kind of stayed plateaued. It just grew sideways. And so every economy is different, and that's why you invest in different states and territories. Tax advantages as well. By doing this, you invest in different states and territories, different land tax concessions and rules around this as well. When you're investing in different states and territories, we're investing in different properties. We're using depreciation as well to minimize our taxable income, which is super important. It doesn't get spoken about enough, okay? Because we're purchasing cash flow positive properties, and we want to minimize that tax as well by using depreciation. By doing these fundamentals, you're going to increase your wealth position. I guarantee you. Okay, you're going to outweigh all the odds. Like I said, only 0.4% of Australian investors own 3 or more investment properties. This is what you need to learn. This is what you've got to understand. These fundamentals that don't get spoken about. I guarantee you've learned something new here today. I guarantee you've learned something new. So I've got nothing to sell to you at all. There's going to be a multitude of videos. So fill in your details down below. Okay, get access to more of these free resources. Okay, and have a meeting with one of our team here at Fresh Start Advisory. Like I said, we've got nothing here to sell to you. There's no locking contract, there's no signing, there's no payments up front. Have a general conversation. We'll get crystal clear on your personal situation, see if we can help you or not. Like I said, there's nothing to sell to you. There's absolutely no fees involved. If not, you get a whole bonus of free, valuable information. When you do decide to have a conversation with us, you're going to be getting an ebook. You're going to be getting free access to our video series. You're going to be able to get a tailored, personalized plan, tailored to your personal situation. It gives you clarity and it gives you a vision. And by doing this, at the end of the day, if you have a meeting with someone from our team, and you feel like it's not for you, that's okay. You can take that information that we've given you and you can move on your way. Or if not, you can throw it in the bin. But you got nothing to lose. So fill in your details down below. Talk with someone from our team, myself, Adrian, my business partner, or one of the other team members at Fresh Start Advisory, because you have nothing to lose. All you have is something to gain.